What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part here, courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. And of course, you can get this podcast wherever it is you get your podcast tomorrow. That's on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. But as of a couple weeks ago, you can now watch us live and in person do this show each and every single week on YouTube and on our Twitter, which is appropriately called at Till Mets Do Us Part. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez. Ibby, the Mets have been on one hell of a run. So how you feeling today, man?
Everything is coming up Mets, and I am feeling awesome right now, John. The fact that, we had such a fun time, the 2-hour broadcast that we did last time going live for the first time with the deadline. So we're going to cover all that stuff. But there was one thing I wanted to make sure that, we're going to cover the Braves series and stuff like that. But, we were talking about guests and trying to bring people on and get an idea of what we're going to do moving forward. And this one person has been in my feed for a while. And I said, I want to get this guy on the show. I want to get him on. And he was talking about some things over the past week when it came to certain types of Mets fans and the Braves and where the Mets are. And I thought, you know what? This is just, I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to send a tweet, see if he's into it. And I thought this guy is going to mesh well with us, with our thought process, where we think this team is. So I'm happy that he's here. I'm going to throw it back to you. We'll intro him and we'll have a hell of a show. Let's go.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. I did not expect it. You just kind of told me last week, you're like, hey, I got this guy. He's going to do the show next week. And I was like, oh, damn, this lines up perfectly with everything we've been talking about for the last several weeks. So I'm super stoked to have this guy on as well. Great get out of you. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring him on. Host of the Unfiltered podcast. It is the one and only Casey Stern. Casey, how you doing, man?
What's up, boys? How we doing? I was gonna play hard to get, but I figured I'd say yes. My relationship history isn't so good, so hopefully this will be a better. I'm moving forward like the Mets are.
Yeah, I like it. I love it.
That's funny because anytime I'm like out with a girl for like the first time and we start talking about like sports teams, I'm like, listen, I am a Mets and a Jets fan. It doesn't say a lot about my ability to make decisions, but it does say a lot about my ability to commit. That's exactly what I will say. So
and about your therapy bills. A lot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you know I'm working on myself because there's no other way to survive as a Mets and a Jets fan. So Casey, Ibby kind of alluded to it, and I'm not sure if you've listened to any of the episodes of our show, but we've kind of taken a lot of our fellow Mets fans to task for not enjoying this run, refusing to buy in, refusing to want to be a part of this. And that's been our take basically since the beginning of the season, since Cohen took over the team. You have to wash all that stuff away because this stuff never happens. We used to fly planes saying sell the team, and you're like, well, nobody's going to sell the team. That just doesn't happen. And then they did, and now we are where we are. So your thoughts on just where the Mets have come and just other people's refusal, other fans like us, refusal to buy in to this unbelievable run the Mets have been on?
Well, first of all, that's since the beginning of time. Like, Met fans just don't know how to enjoy anything. I mean, it's look, I was covering the team in 2015, and I remember, like, trying to remind people down the end of the year, like, do you remember Soup Campbell and John Mayberry Jr. were hitting 3-4 in your order on a Sunday night against the Yankees? Like 6 weeks ago, like people like wake the hell up. Are you kidding me? Like, thank you, Drew Storen and Matt Williams, for the Cespedes days against the Nationals down the stretch of that season. But it was the same way. And this has happened since really the beginning of Mets time for me, being a fan of this team for like 40 years. But really, that's the best depiction I could give, because if you think about it, that's a 500 team the whole season. They really weren't that good. Then you got Cespedes, and he hands off the ball to Daniel Murphy, right, the baton. And then as soon as Familia was in a game up 6 runs he shouldn't have been in, Terry Collins sucks, the team sucks, and you had the Harvey situation. They never enjoyed they were in the World Series in the first place. Yeah. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, remember, DeGrom goes and beats the Dodgers, and Kershaw gave 5 of that. All that, we forgot all that. The Mets fans are so used to being angry that they've become like a toxic member of a relationship that you want to like back out of being friends with Met fans. I mean, honestly, I say this all the time, and I mean this, and I'm an Islander fan. I always say that's by far the best franchise I'm a fan of, because at least like as an Islander fan, you're snarky and give a lot of crap to how much the team sucks, but it's all in good fun. Like if somebody says anything about your team, you're ready to fight, like as if they're your daughter, right? Mets fans enjoy hating their own team. I've never seen anything like it.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things we've talked about is Met fans have sort of worn this misery as if it's a badge of pride. It's an honor. It makes you a better fan to be like, well, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Well, this isn't going to be that good. They can't possibly. And like you said, 15 is the perfect example because 15, as far as I'm concerned, there's been a lot of debate, Ibby, over, how good is this Mets team all time for this team that we're watching right now. Mm-hmm. And people keep referencing 15 because we went to the World Series. That 15 team played so far over its head. It had no business getting to the World Series.
When you think of that 15 team, I think of two games. And I'm going to say one because I was at one. It was a game against the Cubs, which was hands down one of the worst baseball games I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've been to a lot of baseball games, but that was one of the worst games I've ever seen. And then of course, that rainy day, that Padre game where Upton killed us. And I think of that game. I was like, that team was bad. It was a really bad team. And then Cespedes comes in, and then, it was lightning in a bottle. People thought that was the start of something, but it really wasn't. It wasn't the start of anything. And it obviously it was never going to be able to build off of anything because of the Wilpons. But this team that we're watching right now, it is special, and I am enjoying every single waking moment of it as this team continues to roll. And I'm seeing less and less people. Granted, there are still people out there, but I'm seeing less and less when it comes to the bitching and the moaning and really taking in how good this team really is. But there's still going to be those people that you have to take to task.
No, I just remember, for me, I always joke. I would just say quickly that, the real reason I dropped an F-bomb on national television during a pregame of Mets Cubs in the LCS was actually having to deal with Met fans all year, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So, but this is the best team they've had since 2006. Yes. And I would argue that the 99 team that Kenny Rogers walked Andrew Jones on 4 pitches was better than the 2000 team that they ended up making the World Series. To me, 99 and 2006 were probably the best 2 teams since 88, I think, that the Mets had. Mm-hmm. And this team's already right there. And I would say this flat out. If DeGrom is healthy the rest of the way, they may not win, but they're the best Met team since the 80s if DeGrom's healthy. For sure.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
That's one of those things, Andy Martino, who, a lot of Met fans give a lot of flack to, us included, and rightfully so a lot. But, he had that whole article, and then he tried to back it up on TV last year, I think it was, where he said, it's unrealistic a goal to try to win the World Series every year. And, people were like, that's the only goal. But I think deep down in what he was saying, there was a point of, only one team can win the World Series. The goal is to be consistently in the conversation, the way the Yankees have been for 30 years, the way the Dodgers have been since the new ownership group took over, and quite frankly, the way we hope that the Mets will be as they've kind of turned this tide in the Steve Cohen era. But, you look, I saw, I think it was a tweet from KFC at Barstool. He said, this is the best team. He was too young to remember 86 and 88. And he kind of went through all of these teams. And I agree with him. Look, I was born in 86 in October, so I didn't see the 86 team win, although I was
so old. I hate you. I hate you. Really. I mean, you asked me to come on a podcast. What is this, trying to make me feel bad? 86.
Look, you look great. I am shocked. I am shocked looking at you, having never met you in person, that you can remember the 86 team. I'm not going to ask you. Yeah. I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but I'm just shocked.
Don't.
I'm shocked. But here's the thing. Here's my point: is that the 99 and 2000 teams, they weren't as good as the Yankees or the Braves were in that time. So they ran into these buzzsaws and they couldn't get out in front of them. Then we look at 06. 06 had issues in the starting pitching and in the relief pitching after the Duarno Sanchez incident, after all of their pitchers getting hurt, basically.
The taxi still kills me.
That team had starting pitching deficiencies. Then you look at the 15 team who had pitching. They had relief pitching. They had starters. What they didn't have was they played no defense. I mean, this is a team that had Lucas Duda playing first base, Daniel Murphy playing second base, and Wilmer Flores playing shortstop. That is the worst defensive infield I could possibly name. If Brooks Robinson was at third base,
it wouldn't matter.
Be the worst.
It wouldn't matter.
This team here that we're talking about now this year has none of those deficiencies. They have no glaring weakness, and I think that's why it's a long way to get to the point, Casey. I agree with you. I think this is the best team since 86 or 88.
Yeah, I think it is. I think, look, the weakness that they had, and this was shown up at the deadline, and I think I go back to the Yankees series and having to get cutesy to put David. And look, Buck's pushed all the right buttons. People getting on Buck like when he bunted Nito like a week ago in one of like the games on this winning streak.
Right.
Like, I mean, there's a million decisions managers got to make during the year. The only people who can get on Buck are the members of Zach Britton's family, and that's a lot of So this is it's like really. I mean, let's chill out. But I think from manager all the way down, it's tough. The one spot where it's like, in covering nationally, and it reminds me, and I've been using this example, covering the Dodgers when Don Mattingly was there, who's shown to be a really good manager, right? He's gone off that job because between Kershaw and Kenley Jansen, they didn't have anything when they got to the playoffs. So Kershaw had terrible numbers, but they were always in the 6th inning. So his pitch count was going up. He was tired. I'm not trying to make excuses for everything, but it was always late in the game, and because they couldn't trust anyone. Most of Kenley's fails in the postseason are either the 8th inning of a game they needed him for 2, or the 9th inning of a game where he was in for a 2nd inning and shouldn't have been there. That's the thing. That's the one kryptonite I worry about with this Met team. The starting pitching is so good. Diaz is so good. But to use them the way they're going to have to in September and into October, you get into the 2nd round of a postseason, 3rd round of a postseason. Do they have enough, whether it's McGill as a starter, who I think would help, right? And you're just blowing gas, 2-pitch mix. I don't need more than that. They're going to have to find a way to get that bridge, if you will. And you can't use another starter all the time. I'm sure in a series, they're going to use once DeGrom in an 8th inning, right? If he's healthy or sure, you do that kind of stuff. But to me, guys, if we're looking for the main goal, that's the one thing from the deadline that kind of was left untouched. And it's the one problem they have is you don't want to overuse Sugar down the stretch for too many 3+ out saves because you don't trust anybody but your starters. I think that's the biggest weakness they probably have.
I would totally agree with that. Maybe before you jump in, I just want to acknowledge some of the comments we have coming in. I want to keep people commenting. Chris Torres, who always watches the show, you got to love this fucking team. Lindor, what though? Yeah, Lindor just continues.
The Lindorks are quiet.
Things.
Yeah.
Oh, so quiet now that he's like got the highest WAR of any player in baseball. I have a stat here in front of me. I'll pull that up in a minute. But and then he also said that's so true. Mets fans would rather lose and be miserable than be happy and enjoy greatness. That is absolutely true. Keep those comments coming in.
That's a huge problem because when you have someone like Fat Frank Fleming being the go-to Met fan that people assume that all Mets fans are like, and he is the way he is.
Frank? Who's Fat Frank?
You don't know Fat Frank? Frank Fleming from Barstool?
I thought Fat Frank was just some dude around the corner. It got me.
No, he's the guy from Barstool that always gets all the pub from.
I like happiness. I don't like pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But the main point I'm getting is he's usually posted around as like the Met fan, and the way he acts, that's why people assume all Mets fans are like that. There is a subsection of Mets fans that are like that, unfortunately. But with all the winning that's going on, they're being quiet, which is always a good thing. So the one thing I did want to bring up that we were talking about before, when it comes to, we talked about on the show, specifically during the deadline episode, we talked in length about, throughout that 2 hours of what the Mets were going to do. And I kept on saying how the importance of, like what you were just saying, Casey, building that bridge to Diaz. Like there's one thing that this team needed. It was building that bridge and protecting themselves for the postseason because that's where they wanted to be. And yes, it did come up a little bit short. I think Michael Givens is a fine pitcher. He's been a little bit up and down to start right now, but I think he's okay. But is that the guy that I'm really going to truly trust in October? Time's going to tell. I feel like what you said before was spot on with the idea of McGill. I feel like for some reason, like he's the guy I feel is going to really show out. Like when you're watching those games on Fox or TBS, like they're showing like who's coming in, like the guy who comes in who's pumping gas. Like I feel like that's going to be McGill. Like he's going to be that guy that really steps up for this team. But again, it's putting a lot of your eggs in one basket, and we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think that the one problem to me, and I agree with you, is still that back end of the pen. Can we get to Diaz? Can we make sure we're not overworking him to the point where he does become almost something he hasn't been to this point, and that's vulnerable? Like if you're working him to the point where he gets tired and then he starts getting hit around, do things then begin to unravel. So I'm hopeful that we don't get to that point. But like you said, everything else that Buck has touched, everything else that Billy Epler has touched to this point, which we're going to get into in a couple minutes, has turned to gold. And I think it's a good segue. Let's talk about those picks, those people that that Epler has brought in that has shut up a lot of people, whether it's Tyler Naquin, Daniel Vogelbach, or the Rough Rider himself, Darren Ruff.
Well, let me ask you this, Casey, and pose it to you this way, because we were both very adamant last week when we did our trade deadline show that we would not, and neither one of us, me nor Ibby, are prospect huggers in that sense. But we both said, I wouldn't trade. Yep. Prospects are cool. Parades are cooler. Exactly the truth. But I didn't want to trade a top 5 prospect to rent Trey Mancini. I didn't want to trade a top 5 prospect to rent David Robertson. I didn't think that those were prudent moves. The only guy that I would have done it for that was a quote unquote rental was maybe a player like Josh Bell, because he's still in his early 30s. He's a switch hitter. He's got some defensive versatility. He has pop. He's hitting 300. He's in the midst of a good year. And he's the kind of guy that you could look to re-sign to be your DH for the next 3, 4, 5 years going forward. So he was the only guy that interests me. So what was your thought process heading into the trade deadline and how the Mets have come out of it? Obviously, everything's coming up aces for him so far.
Yeah, I mean, so far it's so good, right? It reminded me, the way they handled it reminded me of, which is a good thing, the Giants, who won 3 World Series in 6 years and would have won even more than that if we didn't have the amount of pitch counts that you've got for some of these guys who go deep, which is why the next year they couldn't be as good. One year, if you remember, they had the TV show. I don't remember which one it was. It was like the Hard Knocks baseball version at the time that followed them around. And that kind of ticked everybody off. But what were their moves? Cody Ross off waivers, Marco Scutaro at 37 years old, Javier Lopez, the former lefty, who then from the Pirates. Why? Because I got Utley and Howard in 2010 and nobody could beat the Phillies. Well, guess what? They knocked them off and they couldn't get a hit off Lopez in that series. This is kind of how I think the Mets handled it. It's why that one reliever kind of would have really perfected that for me. But look, Vogelbach and Ruff, there's nothing wrong with that. I think, clearly Jeff McNeil, to me, which this is not going to get talked about enough, his play and returning to the kind of hitter he is again is the biggest thing that's happened for Vogelbach or Ruff or Tyler Naquin, because they don't have, and it's not old school anymore, the real protection for Pete Alonso. You don't have that, even though it's not the same way that lineups used to be. Nowadays you could have your 3-4 hitting 1-2 in a lineup, but they don't have much protection behind Alonso. But I think the way that McNeil settled into that 6 and 7 hole has been such a good at bat. It's enabled you to protect the guy who's not really a protection kind of a guy for Alonso, because I got to throw strikes here because I don't want to face McNeil because I know what kind of hitter he is. That's, people don't talk about that. That's been huge. I think you go look at it, his ascension back to what we've expected from him, right, has been huge, I think. The thing I would say about the Mets and about what you said with the rentals, you're not trading Francisco Alvarez to go get Wilson Contreras. You're just not doing it because you couldn't to rent him. Now, if you told me that I had to move Vientos to get Wilson Contreras and David Robertson as a package, I wouldn't want to do it, but I may consider it because of how important this season becomes, because of Scherzer's age and because of Jacob deGrom opting out. I think you have to remember,
with you on that.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I said both, not one, right?
Right, exactly. Both was where I would agree with you, yeah.
But now we're not talking about also the top prospect. Now we're going down to 4 or 5. You don't want to do that, but I think you have to, I don't know if they did, but you got to consider getting greedy that way. But the whole prospects thing is more about the deals where, like, the greatest example of this is Verlander in 2017. Does anybody even remember who the hell he was traded for? Like, nobody even has any idea. I don't remember any guy's name. I mean it. Like, and I cover the Sport 20. I have no idea. But if they don't make that waiver deal deadline, go look what he's done with the Astros since. Cheating or not, he was the one who was carrying them. That's what, to me, the prospect, that's when you could push, you push. If Juan Soto was a guy who filled a need the Mets had to have, they would have forced the hand of the Nationals, and I believe this, to try and make a deal, division or not. He just wasn't a guy they needed. I mean, I know it sounds stupid. Who the heck wouldn't want Juan Soto? But it's like the idea, and I'll say this lastly, the Angels a couple of years ago met winter meetings, and they lost on Garrett Cole. They offered him 8 years, and the Yankees gave 9, which is moronic anyway. Like, I don't want to give more than 5. If you're giving 8, you could give 9. I mean, what the hell's the difference? But they lost on him. He goes to the Yankees, and then they're stuck. Trevor Bauer was a year away, and he was going to be the next big guy at the time that was going to be out there. So they spent all the money on Anthony Rendon. We all know from watching him beat us, Anthony Rendon's a terrific player. He can't pitch. The Angels need to pitch.
Yeah.
The Mets didn't make, and I applaud them for that, which no Met fan will, but they didn't make some rash decision, whether with Soto or somebody else, to do something that wouldn't have really netted them any gain. And instead, they tried to add the small increments that they could. Because, look, again, the Soto, the big fish, They don't need a frontline starter. They could have gone out and gotten Luis Castillo if they needed him. They don't need Luis Castillo. They need DeGrom healthy. Mets did the right thing. They just missed the reliever.
I totally agree with you on all those points. And it's funny because what they've done is acquire a true DH just in 2 players. You know, if you combine Ruff and Vogelbach, what you have is a very competent DH. Now, yeah, you're going to get into some matchup situations, especially go deep to the playoffs, but that's when you're not afraid to pull matchups. You know what? If they bring in a lefty to pitch to Vogelbach in the 3rd inning, you go to Ruff. You try to win the game right there. Like, that's how you manage in the playoffs. Go ahead, Abby. I saw you were going to go to something.
No, I was just going to add on to the point you were just saying about, the DH being a competent position now for this team. Pre-Vogelbach coming to this team, and I'm coming with the stats again, a 601 OPS, which was 29th in Major League Baseball, with a 206 batting average, which was 26th in baseball. Since the deal, we're talking Vogelbach, including Darren Ruff, they have a 974 OPS, which is 2nd in Major League Baseball, and a 328 batting average, which is 1st in baseball. So you completely went from one spectrum to the next in fixing this team. And what I talked about last week, I'm going to reiterate it again here, talking about how the moves that this team was making when we saw, the players that were coming in, specifically Ruff, it was going the more analytically driven, smaller type moves that made sense for this team. And Casey, to your point, I believe you said this on your last show, talking about how the Dodgers are a team that's not going out there and making shape-shifting changes because they don't need to, because they're the Dodgers. They're a great team. This Mets team, regardless of what certain Mets fans think or other people think, this is a very good team. There was no reason to go out there and completely change the makeup to bring in all this talent to change over something that didn't really need that much changing. There was a lot of talent here. You bring in the pieces that made sense, that plug in nicely, and you're seeing the dividends paying off right now as this team continues to roll.
Yeah, I mean, look, you just to kind of, if I was just going to say, to follow on that, let's remember the Padres made a lot of moves, right? They had to because they weren't as
needed
good.
To. Yeah. They needed to. Yeah.
Have they even won a game since?
Nope.
Yeah.
What are they like 1-4 or 2-5, something like that?
One? I didn't even know they won one.
Yeah.
It's the perfect segue. I want to talk about the Braves series and some of the Braves fans too. But you mentioned Casey, and this is Till Mets Do Us Part live edition of the show, as we are going to be going forward on our YouTube channel and of course on our Twitter, talking with Casey Stern of the Unfiltered Podcast. You mentioned the Giants and the moves that they made when they were on those big runs, the Cody Rosses and these unheralded moves. I look to the Braves from last year. People need to realize that the Braves have won as many World Series titles going out and getting Jock Peterson, Adam Duvall, and Jorge Soler as they won World Series titles with Greg Maddux, John Smoltz, and Tom Glavine. You just need to get the right pieces. You don't always have to get the big names. You don't always have to go get the splashy ones and upset the apple cart. And so many of those guys didn't even move. JD Martinez, still a Red Sox. Contreras, still a Cub. A lot of those guys didn't even move.
Chafin didn't move.
Yeah. And you could say that's an indictment more on the Red Sox and the Cubs' decision-making, because I think those two teams are going nowhere. Why wouldn't you trade them for anything you can get back? But that's a different conversation for a different day. Let's segue into this Braves series that the Mets just wrapped up. The Mets also just finished a sweep of the Cincinnati Reds moments ago, so they're on a true roll, but they take 4 out of 5 from the Braves. And honestly, without a Taijuan Walker complete implosion, Casey, I think they win that game anyway. If he gives up 5 or 6 runs instead of 8, the Mets are probably going to win that game, because they kept coming. They kept trying. They were just a little bit too far back. So, look, the Mets traditionally, historically, do not beat the Braves, especially in Atlanta, no matter where the ballpark is or what the ballpark is called. But the Mets, with an absolute statement, taking 4 or 5 from the Braves.
Remember this, too. That was a game that Acuna robs Alonso of a homer in the first inning.
Took the wind out of the building. Yep.
So, you know, when they cut it 8-5, that's 8-7, if that home, right? So, all that. Look, I think I stay rational, and it's not to like purposely, like what I try not to do, and I find myself falling into this category over the years, even as a fan, because of how much the other fans piss me off. I try and like be rational, but I don't want to be overly rational, right? I want to enjoy it. We kicked their ass, like without a doubt. take your BABIP and shove it up your stride right ass. I mean, seriously, really. I mean, honestly, really, seriously. Let's be fair. I kept calling him Stryker from Airplane in the podcast I did on it because it just drove me nuts. Yeah. But I mean, really, like quoting BABIP, go shave. Seriously, dude. What the hell? All right, Boogie Nights. Thank you very much. Like his own teammates want to give him a code red after that bullshit. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, it probably closed the division just because I don't think with the Mets pitching they could play sub 500 enough for the Braves to make the games against each other even matter as much as they could, right? And so it probably closed the division, which is huge because for the Mets, you don't want to have to be mentioned Sugar Diaz, blowing Sugar or Jake or whoever, right? Scherzer at this age. You want to bubble wrap these guys, and having a nice division cushion is a good thing. But here's what it showed to me. It showed that Buck and Max, and I take nothing away. Look, Marte's been brilliant, and we don't give Lindor enough credit, right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, he reminds me of, I know people don't want to hear this, Carlos Beltran, another guy whose Mets career we didn't give enough credit, who the first year was garbage, and then they were booing him out of the stadium a week into the second season. Outside of the Wainwright pitch, nobody was going to hit anyway, and I always get on my buddy Cliffy for not doing more. He couldn't even run when he was batting against Wainwright, the at-bat before that. But Beltran's career was great, right? This is now going to be Lindor. Great. Like we have said on this.
We have said on this show before, sorry to interrupt, that Carlos Beltran is the single greatest free agent signing that the Mets have made in their history to date. Yes. So we give Beltran plenty of credit.
Love
we
Carlos.
Give Lindor all the credit in the world. We're with you.
Yeah. By the way, don't forget this. They don't get Beltran, and this is true. I mean, he's even said it. If they don't pay Pedro $54 million for whatever health he was or not, and I know that's my guy, but if they don't pay him, that's why Beltran came. Was because I mean that was the pushover, the fact that Martinez was there. So people don't even think about just how important that was, and I love stories like that. But point being, like when you get Buck and Max, we may lose the division, we may lose in the October, but won't collapse. We won't we won't fall on our face,
right?
Because those two people won't let that happen. That's a strong statement, but a true one that I think every real Met fan totally is feeling right now. We can Steve Cohen all we want with the ownership or Billy Epler, but it comes down to two guys. When you look at Max and Buck, how they handle themselves, the way they are as credible people, like your hair stands up when you just think it's a different feel. Those two dudes won't let this team fail in the same ways they failed in the past. And that's something that feels good for sure.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what we were talking about early on when we first started this episode with, some Met fans thinking certain things. They're like, well, what about last year? They spent over 100 games in first place and then didn't make the playoffs. And that's the first time in Major League history that's ever happened. That was last year. There was no Max Scherzer. There was no Buck Showalter. Hell, there was no Billy Epler. It was the first year of the Cohen ownership. There was so much holdover. And if you want to look at that team, we talked about, where this team ranks Ibby all time with great Mets teams. I mean, how much better is this team than last year's team by accident?
Oh,
look, last year's team, again, it was smoke and mirrors. They were doing it with hopes and wishes and prayers and duct tape and zip ties and anything they did try. Yeah, Janesh Vargas is getting at bat. Are you kidding me?
Exactly. Yeah, and by the way, and with a Lindor who wasn't doing anything for you, and now, do you guys feel this? Like with Lindor, every single game that he has been asked to step up this year, you go back to the beginning of the season. Like they're playing a big team, it's late in the game. Every single time, this dude is coming through. Every single freaking time. I mean, he has been fantastic for them this year.
I mean, even though this game wasn't that, I mean, it's still, you want to win the game and get the sweep, but it's a game against Cincinnati. But the fact that Buck wanted to give him a day off today, and he goes, no, I'm okay, and then he goes out there and he gets 4 hits, and it's not like they were just like nothing hits. They were good hits, and they were runs on the board. So the guy has done everything that you want him to do. He is an absolute superstar. So the fact that these idiots are done talking bad about him puts the biggest smile on my face, because we've been championing the guy since day one, and it's all playing out now, and it's just awesome seeing what he's doing and what Pete's doing and how the guys continue to roll.
I just want to throw it to the comments real quick before we head into break. Baseball and Barbecue says, forget last year's team won a total of 77. This year's team will win that many by next week, which is absolutely accurate. And then he followed it up by saying, why are there Lindor haters? All due to the amount of the contract to greater Lindor. And that's the truth. I've said the show before, the amount of money that Lindor makes, Casey, is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. That is the cost of doing business for getting and acquiring and keeping stars. You pay them. That's it. The amount of money he makes, it doesn't come out of my pocket. It doesn't come out of your pocket. It is immaterial. You're
still paying $15 for that beer. It doesn't matter. You're still paying $15 for it.
And I a tweet from last week that I had to screen grab from Thursday. It says, according to Fangraphs, the dollar value metric of Francisco Lindor has been worth $34.3 million this year. He is officially underpaid.
Underpaid. Yeah. Pay the guy more. Pay him more.
Yeah. Hey, look, and I'll say this very briefly. They're performers, right? What movie has anyone ever gone to? Like, I love like the Avengers flicks. Yeah. Like, I think Robert Downey Jr. is great as Iron Man. Dude's making like 30 mil a movie. Like, I never sat there.
I think he got 75 mil for Endgame.
Oh, maybe for like the last game, right? Because they knew he was done, and then like anybody sit there in the movie and be like, at the end, now let's go back and think, did he earn 75 million for that?
Exactly.
Nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Like,
nobody cares.
Who cares?
Yeah.
It's always weird because it's a bunch of people that like played Little League that think like, oh, if not for, one little situation, that could have been me. It's like, no, it could never have been you. You could not have been Francisco Lindor.
Yeah, but John, he's only batting .265. He's not good. He's not a good ball player.
Listen,
if I didn't have that injury when I tripped walking into the bar out on Long Island, on Hempstead Turnpike, then I really could have been somebody.
You could
if I would have just had 2 beers instead of 3 beers in that beer league softball.
Exactly.
Oh man, the scouts that were there to watch me in Ronkonkoma that year.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just want to throw out 2 more stats before we head into break on Lindor so that we can kind of put this aside. But Francisco Lindor is the 12th player. This is the 13th time it's happened since the RBI stat was tracked in 1920 to have streaks of 10 plus games with a run scored and an RBI. Here's the other people on the list: Bobby Abreu, Joe Morgan, Ted Williams, Rudy York, Joe DiMaggio, Babe Ruth, Al Simmons, Lou Gehrig, Hack Wilson, Rogers Hornsby, Mel Ott, and Babe Ruth again.
Not bad company.
I mean, that is some company you want to be in. And speaking of company you want to be in, only 2 players, this is from Anthony DiComo, only 2 players in baseball have at least 20 homers, 10 stolen bases, 70 RBI, and 70 runs scored: Francisco Lindor and Aaron Judge. I rest my case, pun fully intended. Let's head into the break on that note, and we'll come right back. We are talking with Casey Stearns of the Unfiltered Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Till Mets Do Us Part. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez. If you've never watched us live before, it's a 10-second break. We will be right back. Yo, welcome back to Till Mets Do Us Part here on the Chop Sports Network. Of course, that's where you can find the audio version of this podcast that drops every single Thursday morning. But now you can watch us live on our YouTube channel and on our Twitter. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez, and our guest this week, Casey Stern of the Unfiltered Podcast. Casey, look, I know that people around Mets Twitter, people around baseball, you've covered the game a long time. They know you. But if they don't, if they're seeing you, hearing you for the first time, where can they find your podcast? Where can they find you on social, all that fun stuff?
Well, on social, it's very creative. I'm at Casey Stern because I tried to just put all of my creativity into it. And luckily, even though there are I don't know, 4 pages of Jews named Stern from Long Island, none of them had it on Twitter with Casey attached to it. So it's fine. So at Casey Stern on Twitter. You also, by the way, could find the information from our store because now we're rocking Met shirts with the prospects are cool, parades are cooler. So definitely pick those up. I like long walks on the beach and am really bad at relationships with women, but I have a great dog and 3 beautiful kids, and I like the Mets. And screw you if you don't like it, Stride Right. You know what? Take your luck and shove it. Seriously.
Oh, God.
That was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to jump back in the comments really quick. Baseball and Barbecue said that was quick. And I think he meant our break, but just in reference to some of the things Casey just said.
Either that or something in his own personal life. Can I give him some advice? He already knows. Don't shout it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Confirm that how fast it was. I'm just saying. It's a family show.
We got MJ Blair, who I think is a first-time commenter, maybe a first-time watcher. Said, "Love the show, boys. Keep up the great work. We appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.
His next message. I hope his next message is that really wasn't as good as I'm about to say it was. No, don't. You keep those things to yourself.
Oh God,
Casey, I want to talk to you. We were talking about the Braves series, and I think we've kind of exhausted all that. Plus, in baseball, you know, it's yesterday's news already. The Mets just wrapped up another series. We got Philly coming up, but. Not only did some of the Braves players have things to say, a lot of Braves fans had a lot of things to say that to me made no goddamn sense, quite frankly. They said things like, this is the Mets World Series, and oh, the Mets, you know, this is all they play for. And I'm sorry, Casey, but I was under the impression that a team would want to try to win a big series and big games against their biggest division rival in August. This is not a May 5th game. Who happens to be
the defending champs.
Yeah, this is not a May 5th game in Port St. Lucie. So I know you're on Twitter. I know you heard a lot of those comments. I
live in Atlanta.
Do you really?
Oh, I live in Atlanta. Yeah.
Oh my God. I did not know that.
When I came down here for Turner, so I'd worked Turner for 2 years before I moved down here in 2015. But I'm still down here. Kids in school down here and all that stuff. I can tell you it was real quiet here. Nobody was saying jack to me. Right. As I walked around with a Met hat, nobody was saying anything. They were all very quiet. It was like 28-3 all over again. And they were looking for Tom Brady. I mean, you know, look.
It's a dagger to my heart.
I will say this. Are you oh my God, are you a Falcons guy?
I am a Falcons fan. I am, yes.
Why?
Let's just say I was always a baseball guy. And then when it got to football, I fell in love with Mike Vick at Virginia Tech. And then I followed him. And then I followed him to Atlanta.
I'm sorry. I like dogs. I can't go through.
Well, yes, of course.
Sorry.
Of course.
So, but I'll say this, and this is just to be fair. Something like that. I guess the saying is a vocal minority on Twitter, right? Yeah. I know a lot of Braves fans that I'm friends with now from living down here, and that I know that I work with, that I work with on NBA, that are root for, you know, they're baseball fans, they're Braves fans. They're good people. There are bad fans in every fan base.
Absolutely.
So of course. That's just to be fair, and that's not because look, I'm not copping out for a lot of Braves fans are idiots because they're sitting out there and talking about us choking. Right. And it's like they got 15 division titles and they won one World Series. Right. They used to not show up at the ballpark until it was in the postseason because nobody even cared the Braves were playing. Right. They were in a stadium for 20 years and acted like it was like some kind of like Fenway or Wrigley, and they had to close it down and with Turner Field just to move it to a place where people could pay easier to go get in the ballpark. Let's be fair. Right.
Yeah.
So, but they're not all bad. I at least know some good ones. I think. You know what happens is because it's Twitter has become the drunk dial that like you want to have a friend tell you not to make. Like if you took I told a story before, I don't take Ambien, but somebody handed me an Ambien once before a flight. And when I landed, I didn't realize that before I fell asleep, I texted every ex I ever had. I can't get those texts back. Like that's Twitter for every fan, I think. Yeah. Sometimes because you see something, you want to defend your team. So Braves fans, back away, just like you're backing away from the standings in first place, right? Go to Philadelphia, just like you're going in the standings, backwards, and just relax. Take a deep breath and just chill out a bit, Striker.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really is a level-headed presentation because I have Braves fans friends, people who are not necessarily from Atlanta but the area. I mean, obviously they're the team. Anywhere Nashville to the Carolinas, they're the team. And they're good people. And Twitter is a cesspool most of the time. And we talked
Twitter is a minefield. It really is.
We talked about the dark side of Mets Twitter at the first half of the show, but there was something so aggravating to me about like when the Braves win a big game, it's a big game. If the Mets win a big game, it's our World Series.
Yeah, of course.
I just don't want to hear it.
The fact that Alonso gets a big double and he does like his little hand thing to the dugout, that's a big deal. But when Acuna scores or rips a double, that means nothing when they're down 4 runs and he's doing the chop. Everything's okay. But because it's double speak both ways. It's ridiculous. And to get to, I wanted to talk about fucking Strider, whatever the hell his name is.
Yeah,
I was talking
about the Falcons totally just warped you.
Yeah, it really did. You just now think about the shitty season that they're about to have.
I don't want to bring up 27-2 in a playoff game when my Giants were playing against you or any other bad memories. So it's no problem.
Right. Definitely really throwing me off your case.
Definitely don't want to bring those things up for sure.
No, not at all.
That was quick.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah,
but to bring it back to Strider, the fact that I forgot who posted it, but they posted the side by side of Strider's comments after getting ripped after 2 2/3 of an inning, and then Walker's comments after the way he got ripped and how he handled it and said, you know what, I got to wear that. It's on me. I put my bullpen in a bad spot today. This loss is on me. That's a professional to me. And Taijuan Walker said that. Strider goes out there and says what he says. They're lucky. It's the BABIP. It's this and that. Come see us in October. It's like, dude, you weren't even fucking there in October last year. So who are you? Like, you're like, the fact that that's the approach that they took really kind of carried over from the approach that Braves Twitter was having when it came to what this team is and just talking about luck. And I'm seeing other guys with blue check marks saying how, the Mets collapse is going to be so epic later on. It's just like, dude, you lost 4 of 5. Wear it. We'll see you again. You tip your cap. You say they're a good team. We'll see them again. That's it. That's all you have to do.
Not the end of the world.
No, it's not.
Look, watch. Let me take off Braves fans. They miss Freddie Freeman in that room.
Absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
Let me tell you something. The first thing I thought of when I saw Strider's comments, and this is how it goes, right? And I think about, look, the Cardinals, another team I'm not like the fondest of, but like I don't care who anybody is, Beltran, Curbo or not. Like if you don't like Adam Wainwright, there's something wrong with you. Like I love that dude, but like that guy, right? That permeates, right? All that stuff. So like then all of a sudden Lance Lynn, then he's taking Chipper Jones, whether we like him or not, right? But just the essence of what he was in terms of, we're not going to take any crap. And here's what I learned, and from all the guys before, right? McGriff and Justin, all those guys. That was passed on to Freddie Freeman and Brian McCann. And then when Freddie Freeman gone, you got Acuna 2 minutes into the season saying, "Oh, well, I don't miss him at all," which was like a typical. Go back to his comments he made. They asked you about Freddie Freeman. Like the answer is like, if you hate the guy, and that's okay. You can't tell me his answer was that I'll remember when he told me like about how to wear my eye black, and no one's talking to me that way anymore. Well, no one's talking to you at all, dude, because you were hurt, and they didn't even need you to go win the championship. So sit your ass down. Seriously. But Freddie Freeman not going to let that stuff fly. And I like Snit, even from across the way. Like, he's a likable dude. Like, I think, you got to realize in that rotation, like the Max Frieds and those guys, they're young pitchers. They don't have, like, the Max or kind of guy to learn from necessarily in that staff at the front. Kyle Wright, they're all kids. Somebody is dragging that guy by the neck behind the scenes the way a team should, not publicly. I guarantee you somebody pulled that dude aside and said, you ever say that shit again, you're going to have a problem with everybody in this room. Because you know what? And I'll say this I mentioned this in my podcast. Take Draymond Green, for example. Guys who like psychologically understand the game, whether you like the guy or not. A guy like that would tell you, what does this say from Strider? You've got us.
Yes.
We own you.
Yes.
We're in your head. Because if you're saying lucky, it means I already got I'm the Twins against the Yankees now, right?
Right.
The next time they get Strider, they may double up 10 runs on him. To me, if I'm a Braves fan, that's what I'd be pissed off. Now, maybe I don't admit it to us, right? Because you don't want to give it to them. I get that. But trust me, we'd be thinking the same thing. You just told them they're in your head. That's bulletin board material. They know they own you now. Yes. I mean, seriously. And what a jackass, honestly. Like, please.
Yes.
What a jackass.
Well, I think it was, it's funny because I think it was Dansby Swanson of all the Braves that came out and basically said, hey, look, they outplayed us or whatever, the very Freeman-esque answer, the Chipper Jones answer.
You have to.
You're supposed to. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, Casey. Now, he's obviously having a great season. He was a highly touted prospect, but he's in the last year of his deal now. And it'd be interesting to see if they're going to keep him or if they're going to let him, because the Braves have done a really good job locking up guys, almost as if these players from Albies to Acuna to Riley. I don't know if Braves players don't have agents, but like they are.
Well, Ozzie Albies clearly didn't. For sure.
Yeah, his is the worst of the bunch, but they're all pretty bad. But it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen now with Dansby Swanson come the end of the year if they retain him, because he seems like a guy who kind of gets it, to be honest. He seems like a guy who gets it. And I think the Braves, going back to this not being the Mets team of last year, Casey, this is not the Braves team of last year.
No.
They've lost leadership. They've lost guys who, have been there and done that in the playoffs. And I think that's their critical flaw right now. I really do.
Their swag right now isn't real. And that's the difference. And I had Met fans like ripping me. I said this during one of the games. I love how Gelbs, and I know Steve, but like he did the interview with Riley. People are giving him shit. I said his choice. First of all, somebody told him to go interview Austin Riley for the pregame. It's a nice get. why the hell are you showing me this? Like, to me, it's like, okay. But like, I like you hear Austin Riley outside of like the stuff about we're coming for you. Like, he's a pretty likable dude. He's a hell of a player. Yeah. But they need Swanson back. And don't forget this, and this is, long off conversation, but Trey Turner is going to leave the Dodgers and come back to the East Coast. And I think that's almost a guarantee. And there are going to be some shortstops and middle infielders that are going to be moving around in the National League coming the offseason. Which is interesting to watch for sure.
Do you think Trey Turner would leave the Dodgers? You think?
I think he's going to. Going to.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to ask you to, and it's a Mets show, whatever.
I'm not sure. I won't. I wouldn't tell you. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't tell you the story. If I will tell you that. I never believed, like Mark Teixeira going way back machine, like this whole thing he was going to go sign with the Orioles before the Yankees because he's from Maryland. Like, I don't care if you like crab cakes and football, and that's what Maryland does. He wasn't going to sign with the Orioles, right?
Yeah.
The traction of. Like in hockey, I just went through. Johnny Gaudreau wants to go home. Clearly, was not real. He went to Ohio, to Columbus, of all places. There's a real nature of Turner wants to come back east. So does that mean the Dodgers can't pay him enough not to? No, but it's real in this case. He wants to. And by the way, Freddie Freeman, once the Braves let him go out and speed date, what did he want to do? Go home, go out west. Right. JD Davis didn't want to leave the Mets, but he was honest when he got traded, and good for him the way he's played. Look, they're humans, right? If you're living 3,000 miles away from where all your family is, and you get a chance to go play in front of your friends and family, that's what you want to do. From what I've heard, it's very real that's what Trey Turner wants to do. Hopefully, it's not with the Phillies.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not with the Phillies. Yeah, I mean, listen, he can play second base for the Mets if he wants.
He'd be good. Yeah. He'd be good with the Phillies, and they need him. So hopefully, it's not with the Phillies.
TJ says Albies is actually paid in Wendy's Frosties coupons, which might actually be true. It might actually can't confirm nor deny. Ibby, look, the Mets have a stretch of baseball coming up, and I'm going to bounce this to both you guys, but Ibby first. The Mets have a big stretch of baseball coming up. Probably their most important because September gets really soft. They've got 3 with the Phillies, then 4 with the Braves, and 4 with the Phillies. It's big matchup against, the 2 teams that are chasing them. So we get an off day here. We get a little bit of a soft landing with Cincinnati, took care of business. How are you feeling heading into the next week plus of baseball?
It's hard not to feel really good. I mean, they're rolling right now. They're creating space, which we've always talked about is the most important thing. Give yourself a cushion any way you can. And the fact that the way that things are lined up for them right now, it's kind of hard not to feel confident. I mean, for this series at home against the Phillies, we got Max, Jake, and then Bassett, correct? Against Ranger on Friday, Nola, and Wheeler on Sunday. Look, great matchups all around. Yeah. Great matchups all around. And look, it's not going to be easy because those are all good pitchers, but I feel confident with the way that this team is playing and the confidence that they're really starting to exude. And I think that it's showing on the field. I think like we talked about, it's starting to show with fans as well. But when it comes to this team, I feel really good. Like, do I think they're going to just completely steamroll their way the next week and a half? I don't think that. I'm sure they're going to have a couple hiccups along the way because, both teams are being paid. Like, they're going to try and win on the other side as well. But I feel as confident as I can be as a fan right now because of what they've done to this point. So I feel good.
Yeah,
look, Casey, take 4 out of 7, first of all, and you're fine, right?
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
And the one thing I would say just quickly that I think people need to realize, and this is a real thing, this is the first stretch of the season, as good as they've been, where it is clearly more important for the other teams than it is for them. If you even go back to this last series against the Braves, the Mets lead had kind of dwindled. They'd beaten the Yankees and the deadline came and we're not sure if they did enough and everybody feels all that. And the Braves, right, it's a big series for the Braves. It could be behind the division. If it didn't go well, the Mets had to prove we're not little brother anymore and had to put it's at home to grow. This is the first week of this entire season where, and I say that only because remember, you're now target on the back, which means the Phillies are treating you the way we felt about the Mets against the Braves a week ago. Right? Yes. And so will the Braves, who it's going to be here in Atlanta. That doesn't mean it's an excuse if they lose a bunch of games, but if they went 3-4 and kind of held down the fort, it doesn't mean they're not as good as they seem to be. Remember that these are championship-like atmosphere games for the 2 teams you're about to play.
That is a a perfect way to put it. Absolutely nailed it. Because, you know, I'm with you. I think the Mets, after this last 5-game set with the Braves, I think they've put enough distance between themselves that, to your point, these games mean more for the Braves. They're going to mean more. The Phillies are 10.5 games back or whatever it is right now, you know, with the Mets taking this win. So, you know, they have a lot of ground to make up and not a lot of games to do it. And so after this too, if for some reason, and by the way, these next 2 series with the Phillies are the last 2 series with the Phillies for the entire season. They get the Braves, I think, one more time in September. But, you know, this is it. This is their last time, Casey, to make up, you know, any kind of ground in head-to-head competition before the Mets, what seems like finally get to play a really soft schedule in September.
Yeah, which is then the next thing is going to be, oh, look, you're not playing anybody. You're not playing anybody. Well, when we beat you 4 out of 5, I mean, welcome to like what's going to give you drama then, right?
Exactly.
But I think for the Mets, the one thing that is, again, it's a better team. But here again is where the feel is so different. Even though they're playing so well as a team, baseball's a one-on-one game in a lot of ways. And where teams get screwed is that pitcher that day you have isn't competitive enough. That batter at the plate gives up an at-bat where he could have walked or got a hit because he's not competing enough. There's none of that with this team. And that means that even though the Phillies are 10 back, when Max takes the mound, he's there to blow you into pieces. Yes. When Jacob takes the mound, same thing, right? Look at what Bassett just did his last start. That's like a cyborg right now. I'm here to eat innings. I mean, you think of Bartolo Colon, but it's like their ERA the last, I think it's 32 games is 2.2 as a starting rotation. And that's even with the 2 bombs that Taiwan had.
Yeah.
I think the competitive nature of the Mets, they'll play well enough. But if you ask me to guess, they're probably going to take 4 or 7. They're not going to take 6. And Met fans need to realize you might need to mute some idiots on the days where you lose.
God. Yeah.
It's a baseball season. You're not going 162-0. Exactly. They're going to win over 100 games, but that means they're still going to lose about 60 of them. Do the math. Bad face if you're watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the last thing we'll probably have time for is we're talking with Casey Stern, the Unfiltered podcast here until Mets do his part. Got about 10 minutes or so left in the show. Ibby, look, we've talked so much already this year about the year that Edwin Diaz is having. Everybody's talked about it. It's not a secret anymore. I mean, the guy's been electric. He's over 50% of strikeouts for batters faced. He's a machine. He's as good as he was the year in Seattle when we acquired him, and probably better than that. That's how good he's been on this tear. Your opinion on relief pitchers, closing pitchers, potentially getting Cy Young votes?
I think that the year that he's having, and I will put it above what he did in Seattle. Look, the overall numbers that he put up in Seattle were incredible, but the fact that he's doing this on a much bigger baseball stage, because baseball in New York is every single day. It's not like 2 people in Seattle talking to you. You got 10 people in your face every single time. You got packed crowds or whatever. He is doing something extremely special. Okay. And it's very hard to quantify, because I've reached the point as a Mets fan. We've talked about this on the show in the past, where it was like, when it came to closers, we've never been able to truly rest when a closer has come in, whether it was Benitez, whether it was K-Rod, Braden Looper, guys like that. Look, we all loved Billy Wagner. Billy Wagner was great for us at the time that he was there, but the fact is we've had a lot of ups and downs, and the fact that we finally have someone that you have confidence in. But the fact that he has done this, like I said before, in New York, but the fact that he's turned it around the way he has over the last 2 years, that he was a nobody. The fact that someone posted that clip of Jeff Passan a couple weeks ago now of him, it might have been at last year's deadline where they were potentially two deadlines ago, potentially shopping him, and then he makes a big joke about it, saying nobody's calling, nobody wants him, they're stuck with him, basically saying he's a big joke because of the year that he was having. The turnaround is what is so incredible to me, that this guy took all of that heat and is going out there and is basically shoving it down everybody's throat right now, because he is untouchable. Whether it's the fastball, whether it's the slider, no one is touching him. He's coming in, whether it's 3 outs, whether it's 6 outs, nobody's heart of the lineup, bottom of the lineup, nobody is hitting this guy. So if you want to talk about someone getting votes for Cy Young or MVP or whatever it is, the fact that he is so important to this team, that is what quantifies it to me that he is a Cy Young candidate. Even on the staff that is ahead of him, he is a Cy Young candidate. And yes, he is. I'm not going to put him up there with an MVP because of the year like someone like Goldschmidt's having. But the idea being he is so important and he is extremely valuable to this team. So yes, I'm fine with him getting votes anywhere in that realm.
Look, the last time Buck had a closer this good, he left him in a pen for Ubaldo Jimenez. Hopefully, we're not leading to that because Britton, I think Britton finished third that year in Cy Young or somewhere up in that.
He was up there, top 5.
He was up there,
right? I mean, he was untouchable that year, which is hopefully our lesson is learned there. But I think the lesson learned here is fortitude and confidence. And you made a point earlier. I think it was way earlier. By the way, you got a little Chris Bassett in you. Did you realize? Like, has anyone seen? Like right there with I don't know if it's that, like, it's this, you gotta have the stone face. Because anybody seen Chris Bassett smile? Like, it doesn't really smile.
Now that you said it, I kind of see it. Yeah.
Only when you don't smile. Like, so you can have the stone face, right? I'm not wrong.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I haven't said one freaking thing that's right the whole time until then. So let's just leave it. But the fortitude of Diaz, because look, that can be a disaster. You're in New York. You're stinking up the joint. You are now the guy who, like, oh, you could do it in Seattle. You can't hack it here. And we could talk about, look, I think, Jeremy Heffner's done a great job. If we're going to talk about how tilt on a slider, it's confidence. I mean, remember watching him that first year where it was like he was afraid to hit guys because he had no idea he was aiming, almost like a jump shooter who like literally can't shoot the way he was throwing. And very similar, again, it's like the Carlos Beltran show. But the Beltran scenario from the first year, look, Tino Martinez as a Yankee, people don't forget when he came in for Donnie, they were booing him off the field, didn't want him, nothing. It wasn't the Tino hitting 44 homers and hitting him right. It took a while. There are some guys that can't do it. I watched Carl Crawford when I was watching in Boston. He was one of the greatest players in the league.
He was incredible.
He was possessed by Mike Morse in left field. I don't even know what the hell was happening to him because he went from Tampa to Boston. He couldn't play. Yeah. And that's unreal. With some guys that happens. Good for Diaz. Good for him, man, because that says a lot about the human. This stuff's always been there, but in my opinion, it's the confidence that's come back.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's even more special if you can do it as a relief pitcher, as a closer, because look, Lindor, Beltran, Tino Martinez, you've listed a bunch of really great examples, even as unfairly as Giancarlo Stanton has been treated with the Yankees the first few years. They have 4 at-bats a game. Every game to come out there and do something to change the narrative. With Diaz, it will blow up first year. And then he was better the next year and then better the year after that. But the rhetoric was still, this guy's better, but he's not really what we acquired. He's not what we thought we were getting. And obviously being attached to Cano and, being terrible asset allocation with Kelnick, the whole thing, whether Kelnick never plays another game in the major leagues is irrelevant. It was a bad trade to take on Cano and give up your top prospect. But that's all in the past because Diaz has turned it around from a guy who literally you didn't want to see in the 9th inning. You were like, anybody else, give me Seth Lugo. You were just praying, hoping, wishing that he could just figure it out enough to not blow up. And now he's having one of the best runs a closer has ever had in the history of baseball. So I think when you talk about the job that he has and the fact that he's not playing every day, and he didn't even get into this series, and he's just been able to just relax and be himself. And like you said, it's the confidence. It's all going on in between his ears. And I'm just thrilled for him because he seems like a really good dude too. Yeah. And he deserves all of the accolades because God knows he put up with enough going the other way. Before we get out of here, Casey, I just want to ask you, and I don't know how long of a conversation this will be, but we'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Look, the Mets are running towards a division title. They're going to make the playoffs one way or another. Who knows how far they're going to go. So maybe not a conversation for today, but you did allude to the fact that, Scherzer's older. DeGrom can opt out. We're talking about Diaz. He's a free agent. We're talking about major pieces on this team. Basically their entire starting rotation. Bassett's a free agent. Walker's got an option. Where do you think the importance is for sustained success in bringing back some of these guys? I didn't even mention Brandon Nimmo, but there's a lot of people. It just speaks volumes to how many people could potentially be gone and how different this roster could look next year as the Mets are trying to build sustainability.
Yeah, I'd like to see them not wait till the postseason. And these things are hard to do in season, but they're not impossible. We've just talked about the Braves, right?
Yeah.
Why would I like to see them not wait till the postseason? Because, first of all, they may do very well in the postseason. But if they win a World Series, all these guys are going to cost so much more money. You may, even for Steve Cohen, price yourself out. I mean, look, B.J. Upton, before he was called Melvin, hit 8 home runs in a postseason with Tampa, got $75 million. And I think somewhere Freddie Gonzalez is sitting on the couch trying to put B.J. Upton back in the lineup. Yeah. So you don't want a situation where guys are going to get overpaid. To me, there are a couple of guys here, I don't want to say easy, but seem easy to lock up before then. One is Diaz, and the other is Brandon Nimmo, to at least get 2 out of the way. Nimmo is going to smile his way to accepting pretty much anything, it seems. I mean, he loves being here, right?
Yeah.
And Diaz, the time is now before it goes like ape the wrong direction. There's always going to be the injury concern with the closer, and you don't know, but I think you've got to do it now because it's only going to get higher. He does this in October. It's not getting any lower. And people are going to see the value you just talked about. And there are going to be people lining up left and right to go get this guy in the offseason, right? Pete is somebody I think, obviously you think about, for me and the pitching staff, Bassett's going to walk. DeGrom, you're going to have to wait until the offseason. But Taijuan Walker is a tough decision to make. I really like him. Is he going to be willing to take a 3-year deal at a medium level amount of money because I can't go ahead and overpay you because of all the other guys? Or is he going to look at this as, this is my ticket, not out? He loves it here. But hey, look, I can get one big contract in my life, right? I got 2 for 20 when I got here. This is it. And a lot of times guys in that spot aren't going to take a deal till they see what else is out there. But I think Diaz and Nimmo are very viable as guys you can probably lock up now if you want.
Well, what about Jake? I mean, obviously, look, Jake is going to wait. He said he's going to opt out. Yeah, he's going to opt out. He's going to go through it. But Ibby made a point, the last couple of weeks about, he could see Jake, potentially maybe going somewhere else because he's not happy with, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ibby, but, you can kind of explain this better than I can, that he's not necessarily happy with some of the ways the Mets have been treating him, playing with kid gloves as compared to the way that they've kind of let Scherzer call his own shots and stuff like that. So I think anything's on the table with Jake, but do you see any situation where Jake's not a Met for life?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's very possible he leaves. I think it's very possible he leaves. Yeah.
Really? I mean, that's go ahead.
Very.
No, like the point I was like, just to continue what I was saying.
I hate that, but I'm just being honest. I just get just to finish that. I get the feel, not that he's upset. I don't think he's not an emotionally driven human in general. This isn't Max, right?
Right.
I don't think his emotions with the fan base, and I'm not trying, this isn't a slight on him, but I don't think his emotions and the way his personality runs, an emotion tie with the fan base and the jersey is as strong as even if Freddie Freeman's was in Atlanta, who was still crying and you could tell wanted to stay. I don't feel that from him. Doesn't mean that I love Jake, right?
We all do, yeah.
To him, he loves to pitch. He loves to compete. Pete Alonso is like, the shit on all that. I just love the Mets, right?
Right.
I don't feel that from DeGrom. I think it's very possible now bolts for more money elsewhere, right? It wouldn't be for less, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Jake is no matter what, like I have a hard time seeing somebody offering more money unless the Mets brass says, look, Jake, this is what we think you're worth at the age that you are. And then somebody comes up and then tops and he says, adios, I'm going to go. But I really think that the most money is going to be coming from the Mets side. It all comes down to if Jake truly wants to be here. And I don't know. I've always just felt the only reason that there's always been noise from reporters, whether you want to believe them or not, from the Heymans to the Shermans to the Martinos, whoever it is, when the fact that those things are put out there, I don't want to say it's just put out there because they want the clicks with him saying, oh, he's opting out, which is the smart move to do because the market changed. He'll get more money. So that's the smart thing to do. But I don't know. I always just felt that he's a guy who's always seemed put off when people tell him he can't go out there and throw. We're like John just said before, treating him with the kid gloves and saying, we're gonna wait. And then the fact that he comes out in the offseason this year and he says, look, there was nothing wrong with me. I could have easily gone out there and thrown, but they didn't want me to. So like when you hear things like that, I think of a guy that just literally wants to go out there and just fucking pitch. And the fact that they've taken that away from him, I think that kind of weighs on him. But I also, on top of that, to continue your point, Casey, I think he is also just a pretty much a family-driven man who would be happy with just going down to the South or whatever, regardless of what team it is, and just go out there and just throw and be close with his family and not really worry about the likes of New York and that aura that of a baseball town that New York is. He'd be content pitching in an Atlanta, in a Tampa.
Even in a Houston, if the Houston Astros wanted to throw the money at him and Verlander stayed another year and get to live, I think for sure. And just to expound on what you just said, and by the way, Boston wouldn't, which it's like to go back to I want to live with yada yada yada. The Red Sox, who by the way are going to need to spend a lot of money and fix this stat way, because the only way they're going to fix it, and they're the Red Sox, and they may watch the Yankees win the World Series, heaven forbid, right? And I don't think Aaron Judge is going there. They're going to spend money somewhere. They don't have anyone that could pitch. So
or play defense for 6 months,
do anything, right?
Yeah.
So, but to your point, what you said about DeGrom, I don't take it as much as the Mets with the kid gloves, but all he wants to do is pitch.
Right.
I don't feel all he wants to do is be a Met, and that's okay. Doesn't mean I don't love him, but I don't know how you guys feel differently. And again, we're from but even in covering it over the years, he's to your point, like he loves his craft, he loves to compete, but he's like almost robotic in some ways, and because the heartstrings aren't there as much. That family stuff, an extra $1 or $2, right, or a few million. I don't got to go be like Max Scherzer's number 2 because Scherzer's the guy. Look, this stuff happens. Everybody's going to be in love with Scherzer. I can go be the man and go be a savior. And sometimes that's the ego stuff gets on pitchers.
Yeah.
If you ask me, I actually think it's about 50-50.
Yeah. Do you think the fact before we dive further into this conversation, we're a little over an hour. Do you have a little bit more time? If you don't, that's fine, and we can end the conversation.
I'm almost 45, and I have no social life.
Okay, fair enough. So you got plenty of time to dive into this. Okay. No. Do you think the fact that he's been
follow me at Casey Stern?
Do you think the fact we used to be like an hour clean show. Once we've started going a live stream, like we did the trade deadline, we did 2 hours, which we won't force you to do, but this is a good conversation.
One thing that'll never be said about this podcast, it was quick.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, I appreciate you, first of all, doing the show and giving us more time. Do you think the fact that he's been so adamant, look, any player in Jacob deGrom's position, ability level, all that stuff, he also didn't come up until a bit later. So, he's maximizing dollars. That's what he's doing by opting out. But do you think the fact that he's been so adamant about opting out it plays into the 50-50 decision that you just said? Like, do you think that's part of it? Not just the money, but just like, he's like, hey, I didn't pitch for 390 days.
He's not tied down. He's not tied down. And I only use Freddie because it was very, very recently and it was here.
Yeah.
The Braves screwed that up. Freddie Freeman should still be on the Braves. Like, even as a Met fan, like, that guy should be there, retiring as a member. I mean, it's ridiculous that he's not, to be honest. I mentioned Molina and Wainwright. Does anyone want to see Yadier Molina play? Even if you don't like Yadier Molina, it's like you respect the hell out of the guy. You want to see like one of those Emmitt Smith is on the Arizona Cardinals nonsense kind of things. Like, nobody wants to see that, right? It's or Matt Ryan as where's he now? Anyway,
Indianapolis.
That was just too easy. That was just too easy. Luckily, I mentioned Matt Ryan, not Ken O'Brien. Then we'll need therapy. There'll be only 2 people left in the show. Or choosing Blair Thomas over Emmitt Smith, who I just mentioned, 1 pick before him. It's all right. As a Knicks fan, we could have had Ron Artest. We got Frederick Weiss instead, and that was brilliant. But as I make the show even longer, so I do think, to me, they're just signs. It's just a gut feeling. Yeah. The guy, if he's healthy, is going to be incredibly wanted. It's not going to be a long-term deal as much as some of these have been, like the Garrett Coles, because even with the innings he's thrown, and which aren't as many, there's a ton of injuries that have piled up. So people are going to try and, I think, dial up AAV, and shorter 5.6 versus 7.8, 9 makes more teams in there, because it's easier to give a lot of money per than to be saying, I'm going to be paying this guy when he's 40 and he can't even stay healthy. Right. Boston's, Houston's, the Yankees, you think just to piss someone off, get in them. I mean, there are going to be other teams in the mix, right? So, I mean, if the Yankees lose Judge, let's say, right, and it's in the same offseason, you don't think they're going to turn around and try and get the – so it's like, come on. I just
especially if the Mets sign Judge.
Right.
Right. I still hope he goes to Boston because I root for just complete dogs and cats living together mass hysteria with both of those teams. Yeah. So I hope Judge ends up a Red Sox just be that next guy and the Johnny Damon, Roger Clemens, all that nonsense. Mm-hmm. But I really do believe that you just don't feel the tie as strong. You know, even Nimmo, the guys you mentioned, Alonso, like Edwin Diaz, you could see, like, look, the way the fans have taken him in and the atmosphere and all that. It's like how could he leave that? Jacob deGrom, you could just imagine him just the way he is, and I love him, just being in some other uniform, whole la-di-dom, here's 102 and 95 on a slider. Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% right.
No, you're right. You're not wrong.
It probably feels like blasphemy to some of the people who are watching and listening to this, but it's like you said, it's not a knock. We love him, and I
want him to stay.
I think he likes enough being here, but I don't think he loves us back, like as Mets fans. Like I think he likes us just fine, but I don't think
it's not as important. It's not as important to him. It's not on his list of things. Yeah.
So that said, let's 50% that he walks, 50% that he stays. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Bassett, you mentioned Walker. Mm-hmm. Is there a person that you would rather keep of the two of them? I mean, Walker's a bit younger, Bassett's a bit more proven, so let's say, you've got Max, he's going to be here. If you had to choose between just one of Walker and Bassett, where do you go?
Well, I think when you're looking at, let's say, it depends on the scenario if DeGrom is here, right? Mm-hmm. To be honest, because then the whole rotation just looks different. Right. But assuming DeGrom and Scherzer are there, right? Mm-hmm. One's got a lot of age. The other one's going to have a lot of money and still a lot of I want to bubble wrap and please don't get hurt again. Bassett got to be the guy. It's going to be a smaller deal, less money. He's further in his career where people are going to look at Walker, and Taiwan's going to sell himself as, look, I mean, I was kind of young when I got in here and now, right? Mm-hmm. And Bassett's an innings eater who is good. What you're getting. And the consistency of it. You still had Ty's second half of last year. You still had the fact before he came to the Mets, he had a lot of injuries in his career. We don't know what's going to happen the rest of this year. He looked better today, but he wasn't great the starts before this. He gave up 6 home runs in like 3-4 games after that the whole year, right? Is that going to continue? Who knows? Maybe he just tires. Bassett doesn't tire. I mean, you heard him the last game. He's like, you can throw 180 pitches if you need me to. If you got DeGrom,
he wanted to pitch with COVID.
if you got DeGrom and Scherzer, that's the dude you need in your rotation.
Yes.
So, I mean, I hope it's not the choice, but I'm curious what you guys think. But I think, again, determined on what the rest of it is. But if you got those other two guys at the front, I need the gimme. Like, I don't know he's going to win every game, but I know I'm guaranteed for 6 or 7, give up 3 or 4 and give me a chance to win. And that dude's doing that every 5 days the whole season. He's done it every 5 days.
Yeah, I mean, Ibby, what do you think? Just to he bounced it to you, so.
I'm with you because I think it's dependent on what the construction of the rotation would be, obviously with Jake being the main part there. But I want Bassett to be here. I do, because I just feel that he is everything you just said. He's a bulldog when he goes out there. I know what I'm getting. No matter what, he goes out there. I know that the team is going to have a shot to win. That's right. And that's what you want every single time.
He doesn't have clunkers.
Pitcher.
Right. No clunkers.
And he's honest with himself too. He said in the post game the other day, it's just like, look, I'm not a pitcher that goes out there that's going to try and blow everyone away and strike everybody out. Like, I pitch to contact at times, I'll get my strikeouts, whatever, but I'm out there to do a job. And it's like, I love hearing that, because that guy is so competitive when he's on the mound, and he always wants to go out there and win. Like any pitcher does, but he's really shown that to this point. He had his rough patch of like 4 or 5 starts where it was a little bit rough for him, but I want to say that at this point, the guy has like close to 15 quality starts already. Like that's what you want from a pitcher. So I'll word it as, regardless of whatever happens with the rest of the staff, like, I want to see Chris Bassett here, because I think that's somebody that any baseball team should want on their staff.
Could I throw one at both of you? And then at some point, I'm going to pee myself if we don't shut this thing down.
Sure.
Oh, we'll go after this. We'll go after this.
That was quick. So right now, if the postseason started tomorrow, game one, there it is. Game.
I got to scroll back up to find it.
I'm telling you. Yeah. He's busy. He's packing bags after saying that out loud to whoever. You got Scherzer and DeGrom, game 1, game 2, right? Who are your game? Assuming I'm going to make it harder. Assuming you would use 4 starters.
Okay.
In even a 5-game series, at least at the beginning, before, okay, we're down, 2-0 and now we're changing. Let's just at the front.
Okay.
Who are you giving? I'll tell you at the end, but I'm going to go last. Go around the menu. I'll wait to see if I want to order the cheese fries. Let's see
Okay.
who's game 3 or 4 and who's not getting a start.
Oh, man.
John, you can go first.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, nobody wants to go first. No, obviously, you go some combination of Max and Jake first, whatever. I go Bassitt game 3. Man, I think to the point that you guys were just making on Walker, even though Cookie had that blow up season last year where he was never really healthy and never really right and had a lot of bad first innings. And they threw out a stat yesterday on the radio broadcast. Wayne Randazzo did that. When he has hitters counts, Cookie Carrasco he has the highest batting average against in Major League Baseball for qualified starters. But when he gets ahead, it's night and day different. And he's like, one of the lowest batting averages. So with all of that being said, I just trust Cookie's track record a bit more. I mean, Cookie Carrasco was one of the most unheralded pitchers in the American League with his run with the then Indians, now Guardians. So to
25 WAR in 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm going, I think Cookie's my 4th starter, and I think Taijuan is the guy that doesn't get the start. I'm trying not to go off of the last couple starts, to your point, Casey, where he hasn't been great, but I do think if you ask me right now, gun to my head, playoff starting, I think it's, Max or Jake, whatever one first, then the other one, then Bassitt, then Cookie Carrasco.
I would say without question, hopefully John's not frozen. There he is. I would say without question, no double guessing. I wasn't waiting to see what you were going to say either, Josh. I was going to let you go first, but I would say without question, my number 3 starter is Chris Bassitt. My number 4 starter is Cookie Carrasco, because for the things that you just lined up, everything I said about Bassitt before, the things that you just said about Cookie, regardless of how hot he's been this year, he's got 13 wins. Like, he is a well-traveled pitcher. He's pitched in big games. It's someone that I trust, and I trust his track record more, like you just said, more than a Taijuan. And again, this isn't a shot at Taijuan. It's just showing you how good this rotation really is with the people that are in it. So I would go again, Jake, Max, Bassitt, Carrasco, no questions asked.
All right. I'm going to tell you, I would go Carrasco game 3.
Okay. Okay.
The way he's pitched now, first of all, the last 7 starts he's made, and clearly this is recency bias.
Yeah.
The way he's pitching now is as good a stretch as he's ever had, certainly with the Mets, but in years, right? He goes deep into games. He's got out pitches. He's got experience in a postseason. All those things are beneficial to me. Okay. Here's where it's interesting, and I teeter, but I just want to throw this point out to you. And this is sneakily, if that's a word. This is why I asked the question, because we're talking about the bullpen before, right?
Right.
Taijuan Walker doesn't help me in a bullpen. He's not an out pitch guy. True. He's not a guy who relies on velocity, who could then up it when he gets in there. And I'm not confident that if he throws strikes, they won't be the more hittable strikes where all of a sudden I'm in trouble, because he gives up homers. Chris Bassitt doesn't care how often you throw him, doesn't care how many pitches he throws, doesn't care who he's facing. His game plan is, I got 6 different pitches and I throw all of them for strikes, even though I don't throw strikeouts. Do you want to see Trevor Williams been great? You want to see him in a postseason?
No.
Oh.
That's what I wonder. And I wonder this aloud, because I say out loud in my mind, it's Bassitt, Carrasco 3 and 4.
Yeah. But then when you think,
when you got because think about this, and we're way down the road. If Spencer Strider was listening to this, he'd have a heart attack. I mean, we're so lucky. Spencer, sorry to the Stride Right family. We're so lucky. We're freaking all the way down to the end of the postseason now. Screw you.
Yeah.
Right. We're lining up a World Series rotation here and trying to bump one of our starters to the pen.
I mean, I'm gray. I just peed my leg, and we're already in the postseason. So screw you. No, But think about this though, because I think it's interesting. If in a short series, remember Scherzer and Strasburg, they backed each other up, right? So both of them pitched in Game 5 in the game they won in LA in that first round that they went to the World Series. One started, one backed up. You already have seen Scherzer do it. If Max is healthy, you're good if he pitches Game 1 that he can come in the back of Game 4 and DeGrom can go Game 5 in a short series. You already know that, right? So I may not even throw the Game 4 guy anyway. But what we don't know is what happens if they can't go at all and they get a clunker. Who's the guy who's keeping me in the game? Who's the guy who I know won't let it get out of hand? Who's the guy who seems to have no pulse whatsoever and just throw strikes? Bassitt becomes a really interesting guy as maybe with most teams he pitched, of course, pitched well enough. But I got DeGrom and Scherzer, right? And in a short series, those are the two guys I'm riding. They may get 5 starts in a 7-game series. For all you know, you could do it that way, 1, 4, and 7. I mean, we're doing math on the fly. But I'm curious what you guys think about it. Trevor Williams can't be that. We already don't have an 8th inning guy, right? Mm-hmm. But Bassitt can get in the 4th inning and take you 2 Diaz in a game that's 5-5, where neither pitcher had it at the beginning. Yeah. I'm just saying, it's a thought.
It's not a bad one.
It's not a bad thought at all. No.
Because he has the rubber arm. He goes out there. He just pitches. He seems emotionless. He's the kind of guy who doesn't have it seems to be, at least when in the context of pitching, not necessarily going for contracts. He doesn't have an ego. He's like, just put me out there. I'm going to do my job. Wherever you put me, I'm going to try to succeed. And Trevor Williams has been really good, but I don't want him pitching in a big spot in the playoffs. I think he's a good long man over the course of a season. I don't think he's a great long man in the playoffs. It's really, really good food for thought. I mean, it does bring me back to the days of Curt Schilling and Randy Johnson. And, can Chris Bassitt be your Miguel Batista?
Yeah,
that's right.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a really good one.
And your need for other guys. And that's the thing. Look, McGill, that's what makes him so interesting. Look, Taijuan Walker, if he doesn't pitch well, may not make one of the rounds as in a shorter series. He may not have a place there because he's just not a guy you could see coming out of the bullpen because he gives up too many home runs when he's middle. He too homer happy. I mean, we've seen it here. And last year in the second half, he was getting beat up. Later in the season, you're in October with more innings. Bassitt keeps the ball in the ballpark, and he just keeps the ball on the ground with the infield that they have. All those things to me speak, hey, I got a 5-5 game in the second, and neither starter's going. I got Bassitt, you don't. Now, McGill could fit that too, but I'm just saying it's an interesting thing to think about. By the way, it means we're pretty good if we're thinking about this kind of shit. But it's an interesting thing to think about,
It is an interesting conversation. Is, So much so that, when we get a little closer to the end of the season and maybe in the playoffs, if you have time, if you've got another hour and a half and you want to come back on, some stuff and see how right or wrong we were, we'd love to have you back.
Absolutely.
Dude, anytime. I'm welcome. Well, I'm telling you, I'm welcome anytime.
You are welcome.
I feel like I'm it's like I'm sex drunk just from having a conversation about the Mets for an hour and 20 minutes and they're this good. It's like I'm used to conversations about a pop-up for Luis Castillo or Mr. Met giving the finger or sex toys in a clubhouse or Mickey Callaway's apologies because we're fighting members of the media. Armando Benitez, oh my God, the balk that lost the game against Sunday Night Baseball against the Yankees. I've got all these badgers, but not today. Braden Looper, forget Braden Looper, Spencer Strider, members of your family, come over. I'm here in Atlanta. Yeah. Welcome to hang out with you. We can get lucky together. Anytime. Happy to be here.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that is an episode. It has been a ton of fun. Casey Stern from the Unfiltered Podcast, obviously covered baseball a long time, covering sports, living down behind enemy lines in Atlanta. An absolute treat to have him. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez. This is Till Mets Do Us Part. Hope you watched live. Thanks to everybody who did. If not, you can find this on YouTube as soon as we end the broadcast, and you can find it wherever you get your podcast tomorrow morning. You won't be able to see us, but you will be able to listen to the entire thing. Till next week.
We're all beautiful.